Susan wasn't afraid of running out of money. She and Dennis had done well, almost $2 million, a house paid off, kids grown. What kept her up at night was a number she'd watched up close years earlier sitting beside her mother. I'm Jose Martin, founder of Lifecraft Wealth Management, and this week's Real Talk is about the cost almost no one plans for and the person it really lands on. Dennis is 64 and just stepped back from a long career. Susan's 62, empty nesters in Broward County, home paid off, right around $1.8 million saved, most of it in Dennis's retirement accounts, plus a brokerage account, a Roth, and some cash. On paper, a strong plan. But Susan had been through something Dennis hadn't. For nearly 8 years, she helped manage her mother's care through dementia, and she watched what a long illness can do, not just to the person who's sick, but to the spouse left standing. So when they sat down with me, Susan asked the question I hear more than almost any other. What if one of us needs care like that? Does it take everything we've built, and what happens to the one who's left? Well, here's the reframe I give them. Most people fear long-term care as one giant bill that wipes out savings. But that's not really the danger. The danger's quieter. An unplanned care event doesn't just drain the account. It can impoverish the healthy spouse for the rest of their life. Picture it. One of you needs years of care. The bills come out of the shared nest egg. Then that spouse passes and the survivor is left with a smaller pile, one Social Security check instead of two, a higher tax bracket on the same income, and maybe 20 more years to fund. The cost isn't just the care, it's what the care leaves behind. And the first thing we did wasn't to sell Susan anything. It was to give the fear a number, because an unknown is terrifying, and a number is something we can plan around. Because most people are working from the wrong map, 3 traps. First, the biggest myth in retirement, that Medicare will cover it. It won't. Medicare covers a short stretch of skilled care after a hospital stay, about 100 days, and then nothing for the kind of long-term care, help with daily living care we're talking about. Second, we'll just self-insure, which is fine for a short event, but a long one in a bad market can force you to sell investments at the worst possible time to pay the bills. And third, the one nobody sees coming, the survivor. Run out of options and the path is spending down almost everything before any help arrives. And it's the healthy spouse who lives with the result. Here's the part that's hard to hear. About 7 in 10 of us will need some care, and 1 in 5 will need it for more than 5 years. So, we built a plan using Wealth Map, means, aspirations, and protection. And this one lives in protection. The idea is simple. Give every version of this risk its own home. First, we bounded it and looked at self-funding the likely event. The truth? A typical Florida care event, even a few years of it, their $1.8 million can absorb. That alone lifted a weight. They weren't one bad break from ruin, and we keep their all-weather buffer deep enough that a care bill during a downturn gets paid from the calm money, not by selling stocks at the bottom. Second, and this is the key, we looked at the catastrophic tail, the long 5 to 8 year case, the one that Susan watched her mother live through. That's a slice that's simply too big to safely self-fund. And that specific risk is exactly what insurance exists for. So we evaluated whether transferring it made sense for them, turning an unknowable catastrophe into a known, manageable cost. And third, we protected the survivor on purpose. We sequenced their accounts so the larger Social Security check and the tax-free Roth dollars are preserved for whoever's left. You can't stop the storm, but you can build so it doesn't take the house. Let me show you why this matters. Here's the fear. Given a number, what care actually costs in Florida by how long it lasts. A year is real money. The long tail is the one that hurts. Now, watch the difference it makes for Susan. The red line is the road they were on. A long-term care event in a rough market paid entirely out of pocket. It draws the nest egg down, and in our illustration, Susan runs low in her early 90s, exactly when she has the least flexibility. The gold line is the plan. The typical years self-funded, the catastrophic tail transferred, and her income protected. And she stays secure for life. Same event, completely different ending for the person left behind. And I want to be honest, a typical event they could self-fund. So this was never about over-insuring. It was about covering the one risk that's simply too big to carry alone. A few weeks later, Susan told me the fear that had followed her since her mother's illness had finally quieted. She said it better than I could. Quote, "I watched what it did to my parents. Now I know that won't be us, and for the first time, I'm not afraid of getting older." That's what protection is really for. So, here's who this is for. If you're an empty nester with $500,000, $5 million, or anything in between, and you've watched a parent go through a long illness and quietly wondered, what would that do to us? That fear has a plan. Not a product pitch, a plan that turns the scariest unknown in retirement into a line item you've already handled. If that's you, let's talk. I'm Jose Martin with LifeCraft Wealth Management, and I'll see you soon.